Hiya, Jess here, and in today's video we've got Gobbins, a little goblin. He's a very happy little goblin from the Lair of the Orc Lord expansion for Warhammer Quest. I was very kindly sent a big bundle of Warhammer Quest stuff, of which this expansion was included in. Does that make sense? Let's hope so. And yeah, today we're going to be painting up Gobbins, so look forward to that and see how we go. So, reading from the Lair of the Orc Lord book, it says, originally jester to Big Rot the Gross, Gobbins became somewhat unhinged during the fighting after Big Rot's death, as he tried to stay alive by pleasing everyone all of the time. He has now taken to wandering the passageways and caverns, looking for friends to cheer up. Many an orc has had to endure his capering and cackling, and has only been stopped from choking the life out of Gobbins by Growler, the ferocious squig hound that seems to have become his pet. Gobbins and Growler make a very strange partnership, and the malevolent squig hound is steadfastly loyal to his little comrade. However, Gobbins knows that he is not well liked by his orc and goblin cousins, and is constantly on the lookout for someone new to annoy. When he finds some new friends, he follows them around, being very irritating, and it is quite likely that other monsters will turn up to see what all the noise is about. So at this point I wanted to go for a red contrast paint, but I didn't know which one to use, so I laid down a little piece of paper, I painted yellow over it, and then I put 3 different sort of reddish contrast paints over the top, so I could kind of decide which one looked best, and I wanted to go for like the brightest, most pure red one. And in this particular case, I felt that Bile Red was the best choice, so we're going to go ahead with that, and we're going to just sort of like freehand the actual sort of quarter effect on the clothes he's got. What am I trying to say? What's the word? Just the quartering, I suppose. And yeah, so it's all going to be very much eyeballed and free-handed. I'm not measuring anything out, and I'm only kind of like loosely looking at the source material, like the artworks and other people's paint jobs. So we're kind of going to just wing it a little bit, but I think it comes out just about passable. You might also notice that the yellow recipe was a little bit simplified compared to the one from the previous video. We do sort of dirty it up later on in the paint job, but for now it was literally just Imperial Fist and a wash of Seraphim Sepia over the top, which I think gives a nice, actually surprisingly bold but well-defined look. So you could very much just do that as a very simplified way to do yellow, and without losing too much of the brightness of the Imperial Fist, because the Seraphim Sepia is a very kind of see-through paint. It only really stains the recesses. By comparison, the Bile Red is actually quite the opposite. It's a very pure red colour. It's very strong, and it doesn't really darken down in the recesses, which is quite an unusual property for one of the contrast paints. So what we are going to have to do is quite aggressively highlight and use a wash over these as well, just to kind of like define all these shapes, because they can look quite washed out with just the Bile Red. It's just like a solid block of bright red, and it's not super easy on the eyes. And for the skin, I'm going in with Two Thin Coats Talisman Green. This is a beautiful, super bright green. I think it was from the wave 2 of the Two Thin Coats colours, but I really like it as a base for goblin and orc skin. It's really nice to kind of build upon, whether you want to go like super bright with like yellow highlights, or go for more naturalistic tones by mixing in some skin tones, which is what I'm going to do on this particular model. I'm going to gradually mix kind of like Kislev flesh in there, just to kind of give it a slightly more natural look. And you'll see I'm also just picking out some of the other little details, little wooden areas. The teeth are getting done in wraith bone, and so is the little kind of face on the little jester thing. And it's just various tiny little bits that we need to highlight up before you can apply a wash. And speaking of a wash, here's Agrak's Earthshade. Now the initial thought was I was just going to do this on the skin and the red areas, But in the end, I don't know what came over me, but I ended up just doing the whole model. Maybe I kind of had lapse of judgment for a second, I don't know. But I ended up just agraxing the whole thing. In retrospect, I kind of regret doing that because it did dirty down the yellow quite a lot, and we are going to have to work quite hard to bring that brightness back. So the next steps is that we do have to go in with a nice bright reds like the Evil Sun Scarlet, and we're also going to go in with Yellow Flame from 2 thin coats to highlight the yellow up, and I am going to also use a little bit of the yellow contrast on there as well, just to bring that brightness back to it, to stop that kind of like dull agraxy sheen that's on there. You might notice I do tend to switch brands quite a lot in the middle of a paint job. I'll use 2 thin coats, I'll use Citadel, I'll use Vallejo, I'll use P3. Whatever kind of like feels like a good fit for the job, basically. Based on my experience with given paints and given colours, like obviously you can get all paints from a given range, but I think it's really nice to have a mix of paints. And you might say, you know, I like the yellow from 2 thin coats, but I like the red from Citadel, I like the blue from Vallejo, and I like the bright pink from Pro Acryl. Yeah, so yeah, don't be afraid to experiment and mix paints, because that's kind of like where the hobby joy is for me. It's trying new things, not sticking to one brand even that comes down to the models as well. Don't just stick to Games Workshop. As much as their stuff is amazing, there's so many other cool miniatures brands out there as well, so you know, just take off the hobby blinkers. That's one of my little bits of advice. Kind of look around, see what else is out there as well, and you know, really enjoy the full scope that the hobby affords. Oh, that was weird. It looked like the lights went off for a moment, then all the footage went really dark for no reason. Okay, so at this point we've kind of got a lot of that brightness back now. The agrax is still in the recesses, giving us that definition, and we're just going to go and do some more highlights. So we're going to highlight some of the skin by mixing in the Kislev flesh, a little bit of Wraith bone on top of that as well, and then we're going to glaze it with a bit of Carroburg crimson to give it a bit of life. We're going to put that on the knees, on the nose, on the lips, and then also on the hands and the elbows, anywhere where it looks like the skin might be taut and kind of showing some of the blood flowing underneath. That's something that always looks really nice on models, to give a little bit more life to your skin tones, and it works on basically every skin tone as well. Even like if you're doing a really dark skin tone, a little bit of a red glaze here and there, it can still just vary it that little bit, that just makes it come to life. So that's another little top tip for the day. When using glazes like this or washes, just make sure they go on nice and thin. Don't glue them on like you would a contrast paint. Apply them thinly, watch out for any tide marks. You don't want any pooling anywhere really. Just build it up over a couple of thin coats if you can. I might accidentally splodge it here and there if you look really carefully at the video, but let's just pretend that never happens. In particular, I do like to apply it quite heavily overall across the nose and the knees, really kind of bring out that strong pinkish tone. Basically on any model, I do tend to give them a quite pink nose, because it can look like maybe they're angry or maybe they're cold, depending on like the circumstance the model's going to find themselves in. Just a few more little highlights to go as well here, like the little bits of wood. Wild Rider Red is a really nice sort of orangey red, great for just being like the top highlight for your strong red colours. And I'm not just saying that because I'm biased, because Wild Rider Red is a wood elf name, and it's so hard to get anything related to wood elves these days. Speaking of which, where are my wood elves for Old World? When are those coming along? Because, you know, I don't have any money, but I can find some money when they come along. I'll find some money somehow. Wink wink. Wood elves, please. I'd normally save this step till the end, but I'm really annoyed by how shiny the Agrax Earthshade is. I'm definitely going to have to try different washes. I'm going to have to get some maybe soft tone from Army Painter, or maybe some of the Too Thin Coats washes again, because the Agrax and some of the other washes from GW as well, they just come out really shiny, and it's quite off-putting to me. So without the shininess, it looks a lot better. It's also easier to see where a few more highlights wouldn't go amiss. Areas which previously maybe the slight sheen were picking up and it looked like it was highlighted enough, but it maybe needs just that little bit more. So it's always good to give it a bit of a matte varnish and then give it another once over. Moving into the golds, I use Dragon's Gold from Too Thin Coats. It's very similar to Games Workshop's Retributor armour, but it's just that little bit smoother. It comes in a dropper bottle, and I find the bottles go a lot further because the Retributor armour does tend to dry out quite a lot in the pot, even when the lid is properly closed, which is hard enough with GW pots, to be fair. But yeah, I really like the Dragon's Gold. You can't go wrong with a little bit of Reichland Flesh Shade over gold as well. It's just a nice warm tone. It just darkens the recesses down nicely and makes that gold have a really nice rich look to it, and you don't really need to highlight it. A lot of people do highlight metals, but it's not really something I do very often. I tend to find the natural shine of metals kind of does all the highlighting work for you, so I'm not really sure why it's such a thing to highlight metals, to be honest. So one of the finishing touches that I like to do on old hammer minis is black lining. This is a technique which isn't really done very often now, but it gives a really nice kind of retro look to your paint jobs. Basically you just thin down your black and you use it to just paint a little bit of separation between areas on the model, almost giving it a comic bookish sort of look. It just really makes each area stand out from the next. You don't have to do it to every single area, especially if the wash is doing the job, but it really does help to just define everything and make every little piece of the model pop nicely. And for the basing, I do like these Vallejo texture paint paste things. They're kind of like the GW texture pastes, but they come in an absolutely massive pot and they last literally years. I've painted and based entire armies with this one, and it's only just starting to run out. I've just opened a new one on the side just because this one's getting a little bit dry. And I'm putting a little bit of BL10 green wash into some of the areas on the skin just to kind of give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more shadow here and there. And that's just about it. A little bit of a Wraithbone dry brush over that texture paste once the Agrax on it has dried out. A little bit of a grass tuft on the base as well, just a little bit of super glue and a nice little tuft. And the bottom model is basically done. So that's it, that's Gobbins. And yeah, I think he looks really cool. Maybe not the best paint job in the world, but considering that I eyeballed the quartering and I just sort of went with my heart on a lot of it, and I was kind of making the scheme up as I go, despite having the references. I didn't plan any of it very well, as in at all. I literally just made it up as I went along, really, in terms of like what colours to use, what techniques to use. So yeah, I think in that regard it did come out quite nicely. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you did, please do consider looking in the description for my link tree. In there you'll find links. There's Coffee and Patreon, and there's links to Paint Slam and my affiliate links as well. Anything you do, whether it's clicking a support link on an affiliate thingy, or supporting the Patreon if you want to see more videos like this, or you want to support Paint Slam, every single thing is super appreciated, so please do go and give that a look. And you can also follow me on Twitter /X /Instagram wherever you want. There's links to everything in there in the description. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And there's the nice little shots to see you off. Bye everyone.